Oh, great. Well, welcome everyone to our Local Phenology Leader Monthly Call. So we can start out, I don't know all of you, so let's definitely go around and do some introductions of everyone. If you just want to say which program you're part of, and if there's anything you want to share, like an update or anything about what you've been up to, that would be awesome. For those of you that I haven't met, I am Erin Postumus. I'm the Outreach Coordinator here at the USA National Phenology Network. And I am very happy to introduce Samantha Brewer, is our new volunteer engagement coordinator at the NPN. And so, Sam, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, yes, I'm the new volunteer engagement coordinator. I've been here for about a month now. And before that, I was a local phenology leader at the Reed Park Zoo. So I've taken the course and gotten the certification, and I'm just really excited to be here for you guys and help all of your programs be successful too. So I'm really excited to get to work with all of you.
We're so excited to have Sam on board. Very excited. All right, so we could just kind of popcorn it around maybe. I will pass it next to Karen.
Everyone, I'm Karen. I'm here, as I said, in Southern Maine. So I work at the Wells National Estuarine Research Reserve. It's a mouthful. We call it the Wells Reserve for short. And so I took the Local Phenology Leader course, oh gosh, maybe in 2018, I think, which clearly I've forgotten a lot because recently I've been emailing Erin a lot of questions that I think I probably learned in that course, and I should have taken a moment to look at my notes before I emailed. So sorry, Erin. Yeah, so I have started a phenology program here with some volunteers that are monitoring plants. I'm also in a grad program that I have focused on phenology in. So I'm learning, kind of steeped in phenology right now, which is kind of exciting. I'm enjoying it, but still so much to learn.
Oh, do you want to pass it to someone else?
Yes, I'll pass it to Elizabeth.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Elizabeth. I am based in Vermont. I work for Vermont Forest Parks and Recreation. On the forest health team, my focus is terrestrial invasive plants. And we are starting up this season what will hopefully be a long-term monitoring project for invasive plant phenology, which is data that we don't really have in any great depth in Vermont and really in the Northeast. So we're incredibly excited to be adding to that data set. We're doing a local phenology program as well as partnering with the University of Minnesota's pesky plant trackers. We're helping them expand their efforts into the Northeast in Vermont, supporting that effort, and then also starting up our own LPP. And Karen, say hi to Jeremy for me. I used to, I did all of my schooling in Southern Maine. And I heard Sue retired recently.
Oh my goodness, yes. I'm actually seeing Sue next week, and I will say hi to Jeremy.
Thank you. I will pass it to Kevin and Beth.
Unmute. Hey everyone, great to see so many people. We're in Boston with the tree spotters, and we spot at the Arnold Arboretum of Harvard University, but we've been on our own for the past couple of years. Sort of the researchers that were using our data have moved on, but we still feel like we want to be participating and adding to the data collection. And I will say it's supposed to get up into the 70s today, and I'm seeing all sorts of things popping out. So believe it or not, right after this, we're going to go out tree spotting. Okay, and I'm not seeing. How about to Marlene?
Hi, I'm Marlene. I'm in Tucson, and I have two phenology projects, one with master gardeners, and then one with master naturalists through the Parks and Recreation. We're just setting up a new phenology program. along the Santa Cruz River. So those are my projects. Let's see, Sue Ellen.
Thanks. Hi. Yeah, I'm Sue Ellen Albert, and I'm in Sebring, Florida right now. I just moved here about 6 months ago from the Oxford, Ohio area, where I had the phenology program with Adrian Ruther. We were at Helen S. Rudder Preserve and also the Talawanda natural areas. And I'm with the Land Trust, with Three Valley Conservation Land Trust. And actually our executive director is right now taking that course. So I'm trying to figure out two things: how I can support them being far away. And also there is a state park just down the road from me, Highland Hammock State Park, which is absolutely gorgeous. And then there's Archbold Biological Station in Jupiter, Florida, which I'm interested in contacting them to see if they have anything that I could do with phenology there. So I'm kind of up in the air in a quandary as to where to go from here. Oh, how about Alyssa?
Hi, I am Alyssa Rose Martin. I work with Erin at the National Phenology Network, and I do some data related stuff. And so I'm listening in to see what everyone is thinking about in terms of their data analysis. It's great to hear everyone calling in. I don't know. I joined a little late, so I'm not sure.
Yeah. How about Jody?
I can go ahead. I'm Jody, and I'm in Oregon, and I'm the coordinator of Oregon Season Tracker. It's a program where we're watching phenology of a certain 8 priority species plants throughout the state, and also gathering precipitation data through CocoRa's, another citizen science program. And I guess the exciting thing that I'm working on right now is trying to partner with our local wildlife refuge to bring a bilingual audience into our program. And Molina, is that someone who hasn't gone yet?
Yes, it is. Thank you. And I'm on my phone, so I apologize. I can't see so well, but I'm really excited to be part of this group. My name is Mo, and I actually work at Arizona State University, and I'm in the phenology course right now. And the project that I'm hoping to get started is to set up a phenology trail on the ASU Polytechnic campus, as well as the Tempe campus, and get students involved. I run an environmental ed certificate and have numerous courses that I'm hoping to get students involved in. And I can't see anyone else, so someone's going to have to help me with who needs to go next, if anyone.
I think we got everyone, right?
Did we get Elizabeth?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, cool. Well, I'm so glad that we have such a big group today. This is awesome. And we have people who are brand new and people who have been with us for a very long time. So this is great. So yeah, I think Sue Ellen, I heard you have a couple questions. So maybe we can leave a little bit of time at the end to get into some of that stuff, because I think there's a lot of knowledge here in this group that can help with, how do you reach out to and get new programs set up. But the main topic for today that we wanted to get into was data analysis. And so just to give kind of an overview of our thinking behind that. So the reason why we were set up back in 2007 at the USA-NPN was really to be kind of a data collection and storage organization. So there was this understanding that there's not really a standardized way to collect phenology data. And so we really have put a lot of effort into the data collection side of things, as well as making sure that the data are available and that people can easily access and use them. But we haven't put a lot into the data analysis side of things to date. We kind of, we think of ourselves as kind of the data curators. And so we try to offer a lot of materials for you all that collect the data, and then to have the visualization tools and the download tools for people to access them. But we're recognizing that, especially those of you that have been doing this for so long, you have these amazing data sets. We're not providing that step of helping you to understand and analyze your data. So we've been hearing that a lot, and we definitely want to focus on that this year. And so this meeting today is kind of the first step towards trying to do that. And so what I'm hoping we can do is come up with kind of a brainstorm session to develop a list of needs that you all have for analyzing your data. And this could be starting out with like what kinds of questions you want to ask of your phenology data. And then also, what are the barriers that you have that are preventing you from analyzing the data yourself? Is it, you don't have the knowledge that you would need to be able to do that? You don't have the access to the platform that you might need to do analysis? Or are there other barriers there? And then once we have that kind of big list of things, then we can start to figure out the data analysis guidance that we can provide, probably working with lots of collaborators to help you do that. So what we did yesterday was I made a Jamboard, which is basically like a Google slide that we can start to add to. So I'm going to put that in the chat here in case anyone wants to look at it on their own computer. And you should be able to edit it as well, but I'm also going to share my screen. And so basically, what I was hoping we can do is kind of start to think about the questions that you have about your data. And this can be really broad. In the conversation yesterday that we had with the Thursday group, it was really ended up being a lot about data quality and like, how do I ensure that my data are of the highest quality and what are the steps I need to take? And how do I throw out outliers and things like that? But it can really be pretty broad at this point. So I'm just kind of open it up if anyone wants to share. It's either, the questions that you kind of started out with your program, the reason why you started your program, was it because you really wanted to understand just the basic timing of different species that you're concerned about, or are you looking for evidence of mismatches between species, or are you trying to understand, is it temperature or precipitation that's influencing different species phenology? Really anything that you have that have kind of been like the foundational questions, or questions that have kind of emerged as your programs have been going along. So feel free to, I can put sticky notes on here. You can put sticky notes. You'll see on the left here, there's a sticky note option. So you can click on that and then type something and save it if you want to do it yourself, or you can jump in here and I can type it in for you. But just going to open it up.
I'll start.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that I would really be interested in learning about trends over the years. So the fact that, and I guess I don't know if we're talking about why I don't know this myself or not, is I just don't seem to have I don't easily know how to go in and look at this, and I don't have the time available to figure it out on my own.
Great, yeah. And so with the trends over the years, is that just trying to see whether things are shifting with the timing, or is there something more specific?
Well, we look at both precipitation and the timing. Love to bring in temperature in on it, but haven't figured out how that is a feasible thing to do the way we're set up. So, but basically our group is the researchers that I'm working with. We wanted to bring up conversations with people about climate change. So anything that we can relate back to what's happening with the climate and weather would be wonderful.
Great. So an example of that, I know you guys are focused on things like vine maple. So would it be like, is leaf out in vine maple changing over time?
Yes, that would be a good one.
Great. Yeah. Other questions? I see some people are putting some post-it notes. It's great.
we've been doing some readings with our group too, and we've just read Finding the Mother Tree by Suzanne Simard. And I mean, just sort of opens up our eyes to everything. But, we're in an arboretum and trees are located pretty much precisely and things are removed and there's grass. And I'm just curious now, how our species are talking with each other or talking with others. And, I know that our data collection probably wouldn't show that, but I'm certainly interested in it.
So how are like the interactions between individuals?
Yeah, exactly. So if with climate change, if a tree is more stressed because of that, are they getting some help from somewhere else or not, or providing help to someone else?
Yeah, that's a great question. I am not sure how you would answer that, but that's
No, I
really
know.
interesting. Yeah, you could because you guys probably have multiple individuals of the same species that you're tracking, right?
Yes.
So you could see how much variation there is between individuals and whether they're very synced with each other or not. And I don't know if you could look at like, does that depend on how close they are to each other physically or farther away?
No, it is interesting. I mean, we make sure that we look at least two trees of each species, and I'm sure that we should probably looking at more, but there was, a certain amount in the database. Um, and there is some variations, but, I don't know if our sample clearly isn't big enough to, I think, to
Uh-huh.
indicate one way or the other, but I'm just wondering what we could be collecting or looking at. In
Yeah.
fact, one of the researchers who just graduated, she was also looking at the Harvard forest in western or farther west in Massachusetts and comparing sort of an urban environment, the arboretum, with this forest too, and also looking at microclimates and things like that. Though I don't know if that's, really speaks to communication per se, but she was using some of the data that we had collected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we've got a lot of different types of questions on here already. Kind of a basic understanding of just when are things happening. Maybe that would be involving like trying to come up with average onset timings or the length of the bloom season. And then we have some other questions that have more to do with things like drivers. So what is driving the timing? How plastic, invasive versus natives, and then those like trends over time. Any other types of questions that we're missing that anyone is thinking about? I like the thumbs up on this one to kind
Yeah,
of like second something. You could do more of that if you want.
I like that one too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can, if you want to copy the thumb, and if you have like another one that you're also thinking about, feel free to put another one on there. Any other types of questions?
Erin, is there a way to make them bigger to be able to see them?
Yeah, we can do like this. Is that better?
Maybe the green ones too, because they have so many words.
Yeah. Is that better? This one's pretty small. Any other questions? So another area that I thought we could talk about, and Jody already mentioned this, is the barriers that you've identified. So for these questions that you have, what are the things that are preventing you from kind of starting to try to answer these questions yourself? So Jody mentioned just having the time. And it might be helpful to have Karen jump in here too. So Karen has been really thinking about this a lot, and I'll let her go into kind of her story about that. But I think she's identified some barriers already that have kind of been things that she encountered when she was trying to analyze their data at Wells Reserve. So Karen, do you want to say anything about your process?
Yeah. Let's see. I tried to write notes before this to maybe try to organize my thoughts.
Great.
So yeah, I'll jump to, I think a lot of the barriers, and some of them are pretty specific. So long story short, I did a project for grad school, basically on trends. So I was trying to see, I had found a paper from 1984 by Martin Leschwitz that showed, it was kind of one of those first that showed there's a sequence, so essentially we can have some early species, some middle species, and some late season species. And over space and time, those species, no matter where they're growing, kind of exhibit that same sequence. Like maples always before oaks. You get the drift. So I was curious to see whether citizen science data, Nature's Notebook, would reveal that similar pattern. Citizen science data comes into question a lot, and I thought, could we show that Nature's Notebook is also revealing these patterns? So that was kind of the overarching question. And so what that meant was I needed to go well beyond the visualization tool. And so I just put one of my barriers there was certainly my skills in understanding how to use Excel or Google Sheets or Tableau, all those platforms that would actually allow me to answer those questions with some sort of confidence. And then you get into, of course, stats like t-tests and other things I learned about that I didn't know existed. But so that's I think a really big barrier that I think we could chat more about. I think Google Sheets is a great resource because Excel now has a fee wall. So I think if we can start with Google Sheets and how to use some of those very basic functions in there, like the sort and the filter. How do you make a really quick scatter plot or a really quick bar graph to really visualize simple data that's yours so you can work with the data? Because the Viz tool is great, but it doesn't allow you any ability to take out certain things or to really hone in on something you're trying to understand. So that was a barrier I faced. I guess a few others are, and it sounds like, Erin, you talked about this yesterday in the call, the data quality. I will say a barrier I ran into is the no. Having those no's before you have the first yes. So I was looking at leaf out, the first day of year of leaf out. And I will say I had to throw out so much data because there were no no's before. So I scoured my data looking for 5 days previous no. So that meant that first yes I was using, I had high confidence that first yes hadn't really been missed. And so that was a big source of having to dump data, unfortunately. So that is a really good thing to drive home to your volunteers. It's super important. I know it's not as fun, but it's really important. The other thing, and that I'm guilty of this when I set up my plots, is I did a variety of species instead of what I see now is if we can get a few species consistently, like the same individual, because my data ended up not really being able to answer a question because, for instance, I said, oh, I'm going to look at the sugar maple and red maples, but that have 6 data records. But what I didn't realize is those 6 data records, one sugar maple could have been at the top of a mountain because next year it wasn't the same sugar maple data. It was from a completely different geographic place, which if I were to publish that, that doesn't work. So even if you have a volunteer maybe that steps away and a new one, have them take over that same individual. It's really important because I had to dump a lot of data that way too. Yeah, so those are kind of the barriers I saw both in the data and in trying to use the data. Also, and we can get into this later when it comes up, just the individual versus site phenometrics on the observation portal, understanding how those can work to your advantage, which I didn't at first. But I'll stop there because I have lots more to say, but I assume we might touch those topics later. That was a lot.
Thank you so much. Those are all great, yes, great points. The data types. Yeah, so thoughts on any of that stuff? Or is anything that Karen is talking about resonating with you all as things that you've already encountered, or other thoughts on that?
I was going to say it really does for me because we're working with some researchers and it came down to, we had 8 priority plants to begin with. And they said, really, to be useful, you need to concentrate on one. So I'm working with volunteers that are all across the state. We're not looking at a specific site, but the fact that they're looking at the same plant across the state made a huge difference. So that's why we concentrated on vine maple. So collecting enough data that you have on there, that's really huge.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, one thing that we talked a little about yesterday was this, as we're figuring out what are the guidance needs that the NPN is going to try to help with. It seems like it's kind of falling out into 2 categories. One is the needs of the local phenology programs in either things that they need to know in collecting the data, like stuff that's been coming up here about making sure that you have that small period in between your last no and your first yes, or making sure that the individuals are consistent over time, and then helping you all to answer your questions by doing the data analysis yourself if you want to do that. And then the other kind of big bin of needs is with the researcher side of things and making sure that someone that's coming in to use the data who might not know anything about your program, do they have what they need to know what to look for, or, you know, how to determine if something's an outlier? Or one thing that came up yesterday is, especially in the Southwest here, we have species that will have like a really tiny amount of flowers at weird times of the year because there's been a rainfall or something where it's not really a full period of flowering, but it's like a couple flowers on a saguaro, or, you know, a couple flowers on a creosote. And is that really significant in a, you know, a big flowering period? And if you looked at the intensity data, you might be able to see that, where you would see that it's actually been like less than 5% flowering for that, you know, week period of time. But if a researcher is not looking for the intensity data, they just see that there were some yeses, and they might, you know, not knowing really what was going on, consider that to be like as significant as that real spring main flowering period. So how do we make sure that people coming in that don't really know how the data are collected, like, have the right information they need to be able to use your data? And then there's other things too with, you know, I know a lot of you, there's like things happening at your sites that only you are seeing. So Bettina Eastman, who's at the Sea and Sage Audubon, she was, I was talking to her a couple of weeks ago, and she mentioned that they have this wetland where they're observing birds, and there's been a lot of construction happening there, and people have cut down trees, and they've seen an impact of that on the birds that they're monitoring. And if you didn't look in the comments field, you wouldn't know that that's kind of the cause of the decline in the abundance that they've reported. So how do we make sure that researchers have that knowledge to look in the comments or look at the intensity data? And I don't know if that's, you know, something that we have provided up front when we have someone first go into the phenology observation portal, where we say, like, make sure that you know, look at these pieces of information, or if there's more packaging we can do of the data that kind of, for certain programs that have been collecting these long-term data sets, can we like bring that all in somehow in a better way that gives the context that they need to analyze the data? Other thoughts on these things? Is anyone else also feeling like these are barriers, or are there other barriers we haven't gotten down here yet? So another thing that we're starting to think about is, after we come up with the list of like the kinds of questions that you're trying to answer, and then what are the barriers, what we're hoping to do is have some sort of guidance that we can offer. And, people, I think they like to access that kind of guidance information in different ways. So some people might prefer to have a set of like video tutorials on how to learn how to do something, or like a Word document that they can refer to, or maybe a combination. So I did have another slide here to just start thinking about what's the kind of format that you would prefer. Is there like a way that you prefer to learn things, or any ideas around like how you would want to receive this guidance if you were going to try to do it yourself? Mhm. Yeah, and Karen, I don't know if you want to say anything else about your process of how you kind of worked through the analysis that you did.
Yeah, sure. That was me that just put video plus written instruction. So I got lucky, and I contacted Teresa, the director of the USA-NPN, and she helped me through the data process. And so I just wrote that because basically I would record our Zoom calls, and then at night I would go through and transcribe them all with the instructions, and then I would do that on Excel, and then I would do that the next week. So I think videos with instructions is so helpful. I learned so much that way, seeing it happen, but also having it already written down. So I guess where I started was, the question I wanted to ask was, is there a sequence that I can see in the Nature's Notebook data? So with that, I had to move into Excel. So within Excel, I think some of the really important things are just, or in Google Sheets, how to filter versus sort the data. Those important key aspects can help you not go insane when you're trying to work with the data. And even small things like first yes. So in the Northeast, especially, like let's say we have a frost and it kills part of, those buds that were out, and then someone's going to report another first yes. That completely throws off your average if you're basing it on averages. So those key ingredients that I did not know beforehand, which were really significant. And then day of year. So, I know that most things here in Maine, southern Maine, should be leafing out before the solstice for the most part. So filtering out data that says like day 180 or something like that. So then I created pivot tables, which is just a fancy way to say that you're using a large sum of data and making it user-friendly, like turning it into a scatter plot or a graph within Excel or Google Sheets. And it lets you count number of records easily or get a standard deviation. So some of those little key pieces as well. But some of my barriers were that there wasn't enough data. So I had mentioned that before, of just, there might have been 7 sugar maples, but they were all different individuals. And so I wasn't able to make any conclusions. I think in thinking through like what might be helpful from learning through that process is, the visualization tool is so beautiful, but it just doesn't give you enough control. So if there's a way that there's a video that shows you like a simple way of some of these questions that people have posed here, downloading your data, getting it into a spreadsheet, and then how to, like, 4 or 5 things that you can do easily with free Tableau, because those visualizations tell such stories, but getting to that how to do it, I've tried their tutorials and there's a gap. So if Nature's Notebook could fill that gap of here's 5 things you can do with your Excel data sheet to get it into the visualization tool. For instance, it seemed like someone put a thumbs up on my, like, the annual calendar, like what's blooming when. If we had a video that showed us how to download our data and then quickly, like, let's say we have 25 species, convert that into the calendar with the color bars, and you can see in one sheet all the species at your site and when they're blooming, that would be awesome. So just some minor kind of uses of that, but that actually give you a product that maybe you could put in a newsletter or something like that.
I have a question too for just what would be helpful for you, just thinking as an educator who's someone who wants to teach this to a whole bunch of different people with different learning styles. Would it also help, you know how when you first started, there's like learning modules and you'd see like a video and read a little bit about it. Would it be more helpful too to have a learning module like that where we had step by step what you're doing? Like here's a 3-minute video how to do this step with a written instruction how to do it. Now practice that step. And then once you've done that, here, go to this next step. And would it be helpful to have people doing that with their own data? Or if we had kind of a pre-made data sheet with similar data that they could download and then like practice at least the steps themselves as they're going along with it? Or do you think it would be better to just kind of have a video and have them kind of going along with it on their own data? Does that make sense?
Is the distinction between small snippets of like step 1, step 2, and they're really short versus like an hour-long video? Yes, I would
That's
say
exactly. Yeah.
I would say yes, with the caveat of maybe somehow having a conclusion at the end where it shows the whole process together. It pulls the whole process together. I think that's important, because I will say that's great, Sam, because I'm working with students right now, high school students, and I went back because I wanted them to do some of those quizzes, but they're really long. You have to hit next, and it's just not functional for pulling out quick curriculum pieces that I wanted to use with them. I just ended up making my own graphs for them to answer some of those questions. So I think yes.
But including a summary at the end then with maybe bullets of the steps that are less detailed.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think you could use a practice set of data for that purpose. But I would say start from the beginning, start from the observation portal, or from downloading like the messy data that you get when you're in your own observation deck. Like, don't skip those steps.
Yes, exactly. Because it's one thing if I showed them clean data and then they download this whole thing. So start with showing them how to clean up to get exactly what they're looking for. So I can say like, my question is, I want to compare these 2 years. Here's how I grab the correct data for comparing these 2 years. Okay, great.
Yeah. And like the sorting and filtering, like those functions make your life so much better. And I didn't realize it at first.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, so just to make sure I have it right, are you saying it wouldn't be so useful to have like a cleaned up file to look at? You'd rather just be walked through like how to clean up the data yourself. Okay. Yeah, so for, I guess, those of you who aren't super familiar with Excel or don't have access to it, do you feel like if you had this kind of set of learning modules where it's showing you, this is what the Excel file looks like, here are the steps to know how to do like filtering and all that, would that be enough for you to feel comfortable with like making a phenology calendar that shows average dates? Or do you still feel like there's like a barrier there where you would need more help with that?
I would appreciate a tutorial. I'm not familiar with Excel.
Okay. So like starting out, like not knowing anything about Excel, how do we walk people through those steps? Cool. Yeah, another thing that Karen and I talked about a couple of weeks ago was doing some of these like basic tests, like a t-test where you maybe compare two different things, like if you're interested in, say, like you have two different elevations and you want to see, is leaf out really different at the lower elevation compared to the higher elevation? How can you do that t-test? You could do it in Excel, but maybe there's also some online tools that like are like a calculator where you could do it there. So I think, Karen, I think you said that you found some things like that online.
Yeah. Oh, I am unmuted. Yeah. There are definitely online calculators for almost all of the statistics tests. And, you know, because we're not doing this as students that are trying to learn those functions, I think that, I mean, they have been tried and tested now. So my grad program, it was actually a professor that sent me the link for it and said, you don't need to manually do all that in Excel. Just put the data here and it'll spit out a number for you, which I wish I had also known before beforehand.
Yeah, so there probably, I feel like we could look into that and see if we could come up with some guidance around that, because I think what's still needed then is, how do I interpret, you know, if I get this output from a calculator online, like, is that significant? What do I say about that, like in terms of answering my question? So there's probably a lot more there that we could do to help interpret.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I had to search through a lot of resources to figure out exactly what do these numbers, what are they really telling me?
Yeah.
The whole like significance versus is it related to chance or not? Like just the wording is pretty challenging, I think.
Yeah, the only thing that we really have that's anywhere close to that in any of our tools is on the scatter plot tool, on the Viz tool, we have where you can fit a trend line, and it basically is trying to show you, can you like make sense of all those points that you have on the graph that are maybe like your onset dates for breaking leaf buds in a particular species? And can you say that those kind of fit a line where you have a relationship between the onsets and some sort of variable, say like minimum spring temperature or something? And it'll give you a little, it's called an R² value, which is telling you like, how good is the fit of this line to all of your points? And we don't really offer interpretation of that, but it is there. And so that's like one place where we could, you know, provide more of that. Like, how do you make sense of that value? And like, what's a good value or something where you might be able to say like, oh, there might be a relationship here. So there's some potential of helping out with that too.
Would it also be helpful, I'm wondering, if we had some sort of table with like basic questions and what sort of test you should do to answer those questions, because sometimes it's even hard to know what to do or which test to do. But if we had a very basic, like if you have this sort of question, because a lot of people have similar questions at different sites, if you have this sort of test question, this is the test to do and here's how to do it, might be helpful too.
Yeah, definitely. I love that idea. I think, yeah, coming up with this list of questions, I feel like is like the first step towards doing that. So yeah, definitely check out the page 2 on here and make sure your questions are on there, because we're really trying to get like a really comprehensive list of all of those so we can make a table like that. And that would be great.
Erin, I just added a link to what I found to be a really good online calculator for a lot of tests, like ANOVAs and t-tests and stuff.
Great, yeah. Yeah, I think some guidance on how, when would you decide to use different of those tests is definitely needed. Yeah, and then also this idea here about the Google Sheets. That's another thing that Karen, you and I talked about, is if we are going to make this set of tutorials, do we need to have guidance on how to do this in Excel, and then also in like a free version where you might not be able to have access to Excel, so you do it in Google Sheets and maybe the online calculators or something like that. So we'll have to figure out how to make that not overwhelming in terms of options, but like make sure we cover those different scenarios. Yeah, so maybe let's just go back to this slide, just in case there are other types of questions that we're missing. Just want to give another opportunity for that. Or do you all have an idea of another way we could like get at these questions, like get more feedback from other local phenology programs? We have a couple ways we try to do this. One is when you fill out a group request, we ask you about why are you doing this, and sometimes we can like pull out some questions from there. And then sometimes in the annual surveys, we kind of ask about that as well. But any other ideas about how to get more input on the kinds of questions that programs are asking? Does anyone feel like their question is missing from the slide? You can put it in the chat too. I haven't looked at that, but. Oh, it looks like, yeah, maybe Elizabeth, you said something about a virtual workshop. Is that captured in a sticky note already?
No, but I'll add it.
Well, thanks. All right. So I feel like our next steps here are kind of starting to make this list of questions that people have, and then perhaps maybe in the partner newsletter, we could kind of summarize what we have so far and invite people to add in to the list things that we're missing. And then we'll kind of see how these things fall out into the things that the NPN needs to work on. I feel like right now we're kind of starting to think about guidance that we can offer to programs in terms of things to focus on in your data collection. That's like one group of ideas that's emerged, is, things to make sure that you focus on to ensure data quality, or make sure that you're answering the questions that you have. And then there's the big set of guidance on how to analyze your data that we'll be working on. It sounds like this idea of a learning module with videos and text that has like short activities that you can do to be working with your data along the way while you're doing the module would be the best format. And then the other set of guidance might be for the data users that are coming into download the data that might not be aware of what you're doing with your programs, to kind of make sure that they have that context that they need to either look at the comments field or make sure they look at intensity and things like that. Is there anything else that anyone wants to add, or anything related to this topic? Is there anything, Karen, that you wanted to touch on that we missed from your experience?
I don't think so. I did just put a link into the chat box. If anyone is interested, it was just my attempt at a first kind of lesson about how to basically use some of the leaf out data, how to download it, how to analyze it, and then how to make a nice scatter plot, a simple scatter plot in Excel. So feel free to click on that. It should be pretty step-by-step instructions, probably maybe more than some of you need, but that's where I was when I started. So feel free to get that. And then it may move folders, so if you want to download it, that might be a good idea. But feel free to send any questions along too. But no, I think that that touched on most of the things that I was thinking about. And in this call, it really made me feel like having these resources that are focused on phenology, I think are so important, because I am in a grad program that did have certain things like, here's how you do a t-test with a coin, or this other simple thing, but it had nothing to do with the phenology data. And so it was almost, I couldn't translate it in those ways. So I think this, like asking that question of asking what questions are you trying to figure out, is so important and will move us farther faster, I think, because it's exactly what everyone's kind of looking at. The specific data, I think, matters, and how to ask the question and then what data you need. So yeah, looking forward to it. I think it'll be a great resource.
Cool. Thanks so much. Any other last thoughts? I do want to make sure we get back to Sue Ellen's question too. And so can you just restate that for us, what you're trying to do with trying to get the program set up?
Well, first of all, I'm trying to figure out how I can support the folks that are still working with the phenology trail that Adrian and I started. Again, I'm 17 hours from there, but they very much want to continue to work with this. We were definitely sidetracked with COVID in a big, big, big way. But again, the executive director of the land trust I work with, he's taking the course right now. So I think he's going to step in basically what I was doing. But again, I want to support them. So I'm not sure, of course, which is one of the reasons I listened to this, because I thought, well, maybe with analyzing the data, I could be able to do that remotely.
Yeah, so when did you set up that program?
It was 2020.
Okay.
Right before COVID hit.
And so did you guys come up with kind of a list of questions that you had or objectives for the program?
We initially were looking, Adrian is a teacher at the high school, at Talawanda High School, and that was Eric Land Lab. And they had not done any restoration in terms of removing honeysuckle. And at Reader Preserve, we had. They're within maybe 5 miles of one another. And we were, the question we were looking at is how some of the native species were being impacted by removing the honeysuckle versus the native species where there was no restoration. But again, we were very, very vague. We didn't get the program running anywhere near what we had hoped. So we're hoping to restart it and get things on track.
Yeah. Does anyone here have experience with kind of doing a reboot of their program? And thinking of the tree spotters, you kind of are, I guess are you monitoring mostly the same species that you were back when it started? Or have you kind of like taken a different?
We're sort of in a maintenance mode. There was a number, I'd say about 10 folks that just really felt that it was important to keep collecting data on individual trees. So, but there's a lot, I think there might be 75, it's trees and shrubs that were, a lot of work had been done on even before, sort of Harvard stepped away. So I think some of our members have, because of COVID and they didn't live near the Arboretum, they were sort of monitoring trees around their house, which I thought was great too. But we haven't added specifically with the tree spotters.
Yeah, but the continuation for you all is you have the people that were doing the monitoring before that want to continue it. So you have that, that's kind of the consistent thing too. Yeah, I guess I can share one example of where we're thinking about like kind of rebooting a program is with one of the National Wildlife Refuges in Albuquerque, Valle de Oro. They actually are in this phase of where they're doing a lot of restoration at the refuge, and they had been collecting data in a certain way for 6 or 7 years. And they had come up with the questions kind of working with was like master naturalist groups and the friends group. They kind of came up with, oh, we want to track these birds and then these couple plants, and we'll see what happens with like post restoration. But now they're kind of reconsidering, you know, what are the things we want to track after restoration happens? Do we want to keep doing the same species? And they're kind of refocusing by pulling in new stakeholders or people that are kind of invested in the refuge. And so that could be one way to do it, is like you think about, are there new groups or people that might be interested in what you're doing there, and can you like bring them in to have a conversation about what do you want to do going forward? Because I think it's always helpful when you're planning a program to have like input from people who are going to either do the data collection or use the data, you know, before you launch into deciding on species and how you're going to do your monitoring. So if you have like kind of a point where you could reimagine your project, you could figure out who would want to be interested in that and then bring them in and have them help decide what you monitor going forward. And it doesn't have to be what you were doing before necessarily.
Well, this is near Miami University in Oxford, Ohio. So we could easily contact some people, some professors, to see if they would be interested in having their classes do something like that, which would be super easy to do. We literally had planned a training session for volunteers the day after Ohio shut everything down, said nobody was allowed to meet. So and that kind of continued. We did one training session. We had one person show up during when things kind of fell down a little bit. So that is definitely, I think, getting some new groups on board and just kind of getting the word out there is definitely a good way to go. But again, we'll just have to figure it out. But
I might just add, this might be lofty, but we've had a lot of restoration and different projects like that here. And I don't know how it would work, but if you were doing restoration or removing these invasives with kind of a goal in mind, or, you know, maybe native species that should be there that you're not seeing, but that you kind of hope will come back if that restoration happens. And so thinking through that, because if you put those species in and you start saying no before you do the restoration, they're already there and that no data is there. So later, if they do come back, the species you've already been saying no. And I know that's really, it's almost impossible to think into the future about that, but I wish I had done that here, because I think there would have been 2 or 3 key things that I don't just now want to put in nature's notebook and start saying yes about, because now there's no data to corroborate from before. I know that's a lofty goal, but just something to think about, even if it's 1 or 2 things, like a species of concern or something.
okay, yeah, that's good. Thanks.
All right, any last thoughts? Or we also are open to, if there's like certain topics that you'd like us to cover on future calls. We'll probably keep talking about this data analysis plan for a couple months, but we also like to make sure we fit in things that are of interest to all of you. So I know we've done a lot of refreshers in the past. So things like how do you see your group members, or how do you look at your group participation, or like do things in the Viz tool, or things like that. So feel free to put in the chat or let me know now if there's like already things that you're thinking about that you'd like to review, or other topics that you'd like us to cover. You can also, we have a feedback form on the Community of Practice website where you can put that stuff as well. Any ideas for future calls?
I think you guys are doing this a little bit already, but having a seasonality to the review sessions, like going over certain things that we might need when we're getting our annual reports together, or things like that. I think that would be like when things might be more on people's minds.
Cool, yeah. That's great, thanks. Anything else? I really appreciate all the great input on this data analysis plan. It's going to be an ongoing project, but I think this has been a great start, and we will be continuing the conversation over the next few months. So thank you so much. And thank you, Karen, for sharing your experiences. I think it's really helpful to hear about a concrete example of how someone has worked through this.
Thank you, guys.
All right, well, take care. Have a good weekend. See you all next month, hopefully.
Thank you.